You will not steal our business. You will not steal our business. Typically, when you look at rankings of cities in Canada in terms of like the standard of living and the quality of life, cities in British Columbia tends to have. How's it going? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Boma. On this channel, we talk about how to thrive and succeed as an immigrant or just a person who's not an immigrant in Canada. This channel is open to anybody who's interested in information about how to live your best life in this country. Today, we're talking about something really important, which is everything you need to know about living in British Columbia. In case you don't know, I have lived in British Columbia for almost 10 years. So May of 2021 will be my 10-year anniversary of living in Canada, specifically in British Columbia. So I thought it would be helpful to have a video telling you everything you need to know about this province in case you're thinking of immigrating here, or maybe you're just curious about living in British Columbia if you live in Ontario or somewhere else. So if you're curious about this, don't forget to like this video and also subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment down below as well. So thanks for doing that, and let's get started. The first thing you need to know about British Columbia is the standard of living. So I'd say that British Columbia's standard of living is similar to other provinces in Canada. I think the one thing that stands out to people when thinking of British Columbia and the standard of living, which, stood out to my parents when they decided to move here, is just the weather. I think for most people, you agree that the weather does play a huge part in your quality of life. When you look at rankings of the top, cities in Canada for immigrants, or top cities in Canada for anybody in that matter, cities in British Columbia often will rank high. And I think, places like Victoria and Vancouver often will rank really high. And that's just because we have really good weather. I mean, just right now, it is a bright and beautiful sunny day in Canada. It is gorgeous. And, on the East Coast, it's like negative 26 or something. And it's cold and snowy and all that stuff, and we just have better moderate weather year round. It doesn't get too hot in the summers and it doesn't get too cold in the winters. Unfortunately, because the weather in British Columbia is so good, it means that everybody wants to move to British Columbia. So it's a really good place. Obviously, lots of immigrants come to British Columbia, and then lots of retired people from other parts of Canada and even the States to an extent want to live in British Columbia. So Victoria, where I live, is a very retirement-oriented city. The per capita population of seniors in the city is quite high because people from around Canada, will move to Victoria and other parts of British Columbia. Something else you need to know about the standard of living is just how the minimum wage plays into that. So in British Columbia, the minimum wage is $14.60. So if you're working, full time, you can kind of do the math to see how much that will be in terms of how much you could earn on a monthly basis. But again, like I mentioned, because British Columbia is such a popular destination for retirees and immigrants, it means that the cost of living here is quite expensive. And oftentimes the cost of living is increasing much faster than the minimum wage. So there's that discrepancy there. But in terms of the standard of living, I think British Columbia has a really amazing standard of living. I'm really happy to be living here. Let's talk about housing. So British Columbia, BC for short, has some of the highest costs of housing in the entire country. It is super expensive. Places like Vancouver, maybe are even comparable to Toronto, and Toronto, is a very massive city. So in terms of the cost of living for housing specifically, it is quite expensive. I recently did an apartment tour video and I showed that, I'm only paying about $900 for my rent. That is completely below market rate for a one-bedroom apartment. Most people in my neighborhood are paying around $1,300, $1,400, or even $1,500 for a one bedroom. And in places like Vancouver, I would say that it's actually becoming more comparable to Victoria. So people I know are paying around $1,400, $1,500, $1,600 for one bedroom. And depending on, if you want to live downtown Vancouver, you could be paying as much as, $1,800 to $2,100 for a one bedroom apartment. So prices are, quite expensive. Obviously, if you want to live in, cities in British Columbia that are larger, so Victoria, Vancouver, it just means that you may not have to live in the city itself. You may have to live in the surrounding areas. So if you want to live in Victoria and you don't really want to live in the city of Victoria, that may mean maybe you should live in Langford. You may also find cheaper accommodation in Esquimalt and Saanich and places like that. Those are, close to Victoria, but maybe a 10-15 minute drive from the city. not too bad. And then in a larger city like Vancouver, it may mean you have to live an hour away because Vancouver is so much larger geographically. So Surrey, for instance, is cheaper. You may find cheaper accommodation even in Burnaby. You may find cheaper accommodation in Abbotsford and places like that. They're an hour and a half to 2 hours away. But because the city itself is so expensive, people are having to move further away. So there's ways about it. It just means that maybe your commute time may be significantly higher. One of the reasons why housing is so expensive in British Columbia is because most cities in this province have a very low vacancy rate. And the vacancy rate is essentially the percentage of available units that are available to renters at any given point in time. And over the pandemic, the vacancy rate did increase by a % or 2, so nothing too significant. However, for most people who are not high earners, that increase in the vacancy rate did not really change people's lives significantly because sure, an apartment may be available, but if your budget is like $1,000 and the available apartments are $1,500, it doesn't really change your situation that much. So the pandemic did change things quite a bit, and I think in places like Vancouver, just based on personal experience, apartments did get cheaper in Vancouver over the pandemic. It's kind of changed now again because things are going back up, but the vacancy rate has increased a tad bit, but in general, apartments and housing in British Columbia is still quite expensive. Now let's talk about the education system. In terms of the education system in British Columbia, it is again standard and I would say pretty comparable to other parts of Canada. And so the first one we can talk about is the K to 12 system. And so that's technically from kindergarten to grade 12, which is what it's called here in Canada. So many terms, but in Canada from kindergarten to grade 12 is free for Canadian citizens and permanent residents. So, child can go to public school from 5 years of age all the way to 18 years of age, and there's no cost whatsoever. Obviously, if your child wants to go to a private school, there is a fee for that, and it really depends on the private school. There's not like a standard private school fee in Canada, but for public schools, it's completely free. Your child could go to a regular public school, or they could go to a more specialized school where maybe French immersion, for instance, where they would be learning French. So there's quite a variety in terms of public schools, but in general, they are all free. The second category is post-secondary education, and so that is for people who are 18 to 20 something years old or above, so essentially going to university. If you're watching this video, you probably already know the famous universities in British Columbia are the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Simon Fraser University also in Vancouver, and the University of Victoria, which is where I graduated from. Very proud University of Victoria alumni, and that is in Victoria, which is where I live in. So those are the top 3 universities in British Columbia. If you're wanting to get more specialized education, so let's say you wanted to go to a technical school, BCIT, which is the British Columbia Institute of Technology, if I remember correctly, BCIT in Vancouver is an option. There's also Douglas College in Vancouver. That's a really popular one. There's Camosun College in Victoria as well. So those are institutions which provide post-secondary education, but they're not universities. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you're wanting to do that, obviously obviously in Canada you're not forced to go to university, but if you choose to go to university, you will have to pay, and you can do that either out of pocket or get in student loans in Canada or student loans in British Columbia, because British Columbia does have a student loan process as well. Every province in Canada does. But you're only able to apply for student loans if you're a citizen or permanent resident. If I remember correctly, I sound so old, but I did graduate from university almost 7 years ago, if you believe that. So when I was in university, I believe per course, I was paying around $500, somewhere around $460 to $500 over the course of the 4 years I was in university. And in a year, I was taking probably 8 to 10 courses. So you can do the math. However, for international students, it is significantly more. For international students right now, I don't even know how much it costs, but you can probably, I'm going to guess that international students are paying around maybe $1,500 per course, because typically international students are paying maybe even 4 times more than what domestic students are paying. So that's how education works in British Columbia. Now let's talk about healthcare. Healthcare in Canada, similar to education, also free, but of course, if you are a citizen or permanent resident. So we have a healthcare system, you don't have to pay anything. All you need is to show ID. And when you come to Canada, you get your services card, and that BC services card essentially gives you access to healthcare services in the province. So that means that if you're sick, you can go to the clinic and not have to pay for it. If you're sick, you can go to the hospital and not have to pay for it. The complication with our healthcare system is that in BC, or in Canada as a whole actually, we don't have a lot of doctors. So there's a lot more demand for doctors than there is supply. So that means that there is long wait times if you need to see a specialist. If you're sick right now, you need to see the doctor. There's no wait time for that. There's an app called Babylon by TELUS. I have it on my phone here, and you can make an appointment the next day, talk to the doctor on your phone. You can get your prescriptions, you can get referrals, things like that. It's like basic primary health care. Or if you don't like using your phone, you can go to a walk-in clinic, but you'll probably have to wait quite a while in the walk-in clinic. So sometimes if you go to the walk-in clinic at like 9 a.m., you may not see the doctor till 1 p.m. So you're in line for 4 hours. I mean, you're not like literally in line. You're like sitting down and you can come back. And then your number gets called up and then you go see the doctor. So that's how healthcare works. If you want to see a specialist, so let's say you dislocate your shoulder, you hurt your eye, you have something happening in your body. There's lots of reasons why you need to see a specialist. And what happens is that your primary care doctor, so the doctor you can see at the walk-in clinic or the doctor you see on the app, will refer you to that specialist. And that process of a referral can take months, depending on how they assess your urgency. It may take months for you to see a specialist. It may take you a while for you to see that specialist, right? So that's the downside. It's not like in America where if you need to see an orthopedic surgeon, you can see one like tomorrow if you've got the insurance or the money. In Canada, it doesn't matter if you've got the insurance or the money. For the most part, if you're going to use our public health care system, you have to wait in line, you have to wait your turn. So that's the downside. The downside again, and I've talked about this in previous videos, is that because we don't have a lot of doctors, it's really hard to find a primary doctor, so a family doctor. You know how, maybe in your country of origin, you've had one doctor that you see regularly since you were a young person or for years. In Canada, it's harder to do that, especially where I live in Victoria. It's easier maybe in bigger cities because there's more doctors in bigger cities, but if you're in a smaller city, and by small I don't even mean like a village. I live in Victoria, which is a city, but it's still hard to find a primary doctor because there's just not a lot of them out there. So the problem with that is that one day you see Dr. A, the next week you see Dr. B, the next month you see Dr. C, so there's just not a lot of continuity of care. That's besides the point. The main point you should know is that healthcare in Canada is free and accessible. If you are a citizen or permanent resident, if you're an international student, many international students get insurance through the university, which means you're able to access healthcare as well, and you're probably just paying per semester. If you're a foreign worker, there's also insurance programs available as well. So that is it about healthcare. Let's talk about socializing in BC. BC gets a bad rep and people call us boring and all that, but you know what? I'm gonna be real about this. If you don't live in Vancouver, British Columbia, I would say that your chances of having a lit social life are, significantly diminished. Not to say other parts of British Columbia are boring, but they're just small. And, if you've lived in a small city, you know how it is. Small cities can be not the best for socializing. So, of course, if you live in Vancouver, your social life will be amazing. If you live in Victoria, which is smaller, your social life will be less amazing. And, we're in this pandemic era, which means that socializing in general is just a bit weird anyways. But pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, I would say that your social life in Victoria or Vancouver or other parts of British Columbia are not that bad. It really depends on where you live. All you need is money because it's expensive here. Eating out is probably one of the most popular universal ways that people socialize around the world. And eating out is expensive because just life is expensive in British Columbia. I would say on average, if you're eating out just for one person, you're probably going to be paying maybe $30 per meal. Obviously there's cheaper options, but I would say $20 to $30 is probably average for eating out in British Columbia. If you're going to the club, especially for guys, there's entry fees as well. For drinks, you're probably looking at, $7 to $12 for drinks. That's for one drink. What else? Taxis are expensive. Uber just came to BC finally, so Uber is an option, but it's really not as cheap as Uber elsewhere because we have really strong taxi unions, and the taxis were like, Uber, you will not steal our business. You will not steal our business. So anyways, Uber is there as well. So in terms of socializing, yeah, British Columbia is okay. Not as lit as Toronto, Not as lit as Montreal, but it's not bad. It's not bad. In terms of the top 10 cities in British Columbia, according to Wikipedia, they are Vancouver, Victoria, Kelowna, Abbotsford, White Rock, Nanaimo, Kamloops, Chilliwack, Prince George, and Vernon. Let me just be honest with you. Of that list, I think I would definitely live in Vancouver. I already live in Victoria, and maybe Kelowna and Kamloops would be an option. But other than that, I would not live in Abbotsford. I definitely would not live in Chilliwack. I would definitely not live in Vernon or Nanaimo. And that's just because if I want to live in Vancouver or surrounding areas, the furthest I'll probably live is like Surrey, if not it's Richmond or Burnaby. And in Victoria is already not that large. And, you know, the furthest I'll live from Victoria is probably Duncan, but going as far as Nanaimo is just a bit too in the boonies for me. Obviously, that's just my personal opinion. If you like smaller towns, then, you know, go to a smaller part of British Columbia. I'd say the larger the city, of course, the larger you're going to have immigrants. There's going to be more diversity. There's going to be more things to do. If you're curious about rural life in BC, of course, in like rural communities, there's, you know, it's cheaper, but also there's less amenities. There's less things to do. There's less transportation. So you're going to need a car. It's less touristy, so it's cheaper. So there's sort of pros and cons depending on, you know, what your objectives are for life in Canada. If you want to get lit every Saturday and you want to have, you know, very active social life, then live in a bigger city. If you want to live that small town life with, you know, long drives down a beautiful winding road and I don't know what people do in small towns. If you're curious about, you know, smaller towns on Vancouver Island, so Port Alberni is nice. Campbell River is nice as well. There's places that are really beautiful that are not densely populated on the island, and same as the mainland as well. Okay, that was a lot of talking, but that is all you need to know about British Columbia in summary. If you've got questions, which I'm sure you do, please comment below. Also, don't forget to like this video because it helps more people see it, and it also helps my channel grow, and that's sort of like a reward that you can provide me for all this information that I've shared. I also have a Facebook group, so if you've got more questions, feel free to join in, and I'm happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck with your immigration journey, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.